Welcome, my friend. Let everything slow. Before the war that broke the world, there was a golden age. The Erdtree stood whole and radiant over the lands between. The Golden Order held sway, and Queen Marika the Eternal ruled as a god. Her demigod children, the mighty princes and princesses of a realm at its height. Tonight we begin at that height, in the golden age before the fall, and sit with the world as it was before the shattering broke it. For to understand the war that ruined the lands between, we must first see the order it destroyed, the golden peace that a single night of murder would bring crashing down. Tonight we sit with the golden age before the fall, the lands between at its height, and the seeds of the ruin to come. The Age of the Erdtree. At the heart of the Golden Age stood the Erdtree, the great golden tree that towered over the lands between, the symbol and the source of the Golden Order. The Erdtree was the center of the world, a colossal golden tree whose light spread across the lands between, the wellspring of grace, the anchor of all lands. Beneath its golden boughs, the Golden Order held sway, the great faith and law that ordered the realm under the will of the distant god. The Erdtree was the source of grace, the light that blessed the faithful, the golden radiance that was the hope and the order of the lands between. In the Golden Age, the Erdtree stood whole and shining. Its light spread across the realm, the symbol of an order at its height. At the root of it all was the Elden Ring, the source of the Erdtree and the Golden Order. The Elden Ring was the great structure of runes that ordered the world, the anchor of all lands, the giver of grace, the wellspring of all joy. It was the foundation of the Golden Order, the divine law made manifest, the thing that held the world in its shape. Queen Marika was its vessel, the carrier of its vision, the god who held the Elden Ring and ruled the lands between beneath the golden light of the Erdtree. The Elden Ring was more than a symbol. It was the very order of the world made manifest. Its runes were the laws of reality under the Golden Order, the principles that held the lands between in their shape. Death itself was ordered by the Elden Ring, bound and controlled, for the rune of destined death had been removed from the ring and sealed away, so that in the Golden Age true death was held at bay. The Elden Ring ordered life and death, law and grace, the whole shape of the world, its runes the structure of reality beneath the Golden Order. To break the Elden Ring would be to break the order of the world itself, to shatter the very laws that held the lands between in their shape. This is what made the shattering so catastrophic, though none in the Golden Age foresaw it. The Elden Ring was the order of the world, and to shatter it was to break that order, to loose the chaos the ring had held in check. When Marika broke the Elden Ring, she broke more than a symbol, more than a structure of runes. She broke the order of the world, loosing ruin and corruption across the lands between. But in the Golden Age, the Elden Ring stood intact, the order of the world held firm, the runes of reality whole beneath the great tree. The catastrophe of its breaking was still to come, unimagined beneath the golden light. This was the Golden Age, the age of the Erdtree, the height of the Golden Order. The realm was whole, the Erdtree radiant, the Elden Ring intact. The grace of gold spread across the lands between. Under Marika and her order, the realm knew a golden peace, an age of light and order beneath the great tree. It was an age that seemed eternal, the Golden Order at its height, the Erdtree shining over a realm at peace. And yet, beneath the golden light, the seeds of its ruin were already growing. To picture the Golden Age is to picture a realm ordered and blessed beneath the great tree. The Erdtree towered over the lands between, visible from every corner of the realm, its golden light a constant presence, the sign of the order that held sway. Beneath it stood Lendal, the royal capital, the seat of the Golden Order, a great golden city at the foot of the tree. Across the realm, the faithful lived under the grace of gold, blessed by the light of the Erdtree, ordered by the law of the Golden Order. It was a realm of light and order, blessed and whole, the Golden Age of the lands between. And the grace of gold was the heart of it, the blessing that flowed from the Erdtree to the faithful. Grace was the favor of the Golden Order, the golden guidance that blessed those who lived under the order, the light that marked the chosen of the Erdtree. In the Golden Age, grace flowed freely. The blessing of gold spread across the realm, the faithful living under the guidance and favor of the Golden Order. This grace would matter greatly in the ruin to come, for its giving and its withdrawing would shape the fate of the realm. But in the Golden Age, grace was the blessing of a realm at its height, the golden favor that flowed from the great tree to the faithful beneath it. It seemed, in that age, that the Golden Order would stand forever. The Erdtree was eternal, the Elden Ring intact, the Queen a god upon her throne, the demigods the mighty princes of the realm. Nothing seemed able to break the golden peace, the order that held the lands between beneath the great tree. And yet the Golden Age was not eternal. Beneath its light, the discontent was growing, the doubt spreading, the seeds of ruin taking root. The age that seemed it would last forever was closer to its ending than any knew. The golden peace already carrying within it the war that would break the world. The Queen and her order. At the summit of the Golden Age stood Queen Marika the Eternal, the god of the lands between, the vessel of the Elden Ring. Marika was the divine ruler of the lands between, the vessel of the Elden Ring, a god in truth. She had grown the Erdtree, established the Golden Order, and ruled the realm as its god beneath the golden light. It was Marika who held the vision of the Elden Ring. Marika, who ordered the realm under the Golden Order. Marika, who stood at the summit of the Golden Age, as the god of the lands between. She was the eternal queen, the divine ruler, the god who held the realm in the golden peace of her order. At her side stood her consort, Radahn, the second Elden Lord, a red-haired champion of immense power who had become the lord at Marika's side. Together the queen and her consort ruled the Golden Age, the god and the Elden Lord standing at the summit of the Golden Order. And there was a secret in this, a truth hidden beneath the golden light. Radahn was Marika's other half, the two of them a single being in two forms, god and consort sharing one existence. The queen and her lord were, in their deepest nature, one, a secret woven into the very heart of the Golden Order. This secret would matter in the ruin to come, for it bound the god and the Elden Lord into a single divided being. When the Golden Age fell, when Marika broke the Elden Ring, it would be Radahn, her other half, who tried to repair it, the two halves of one being set against each other in the moment of the shattering. The god who broke the order and the lord who sought to mend it were one and the same, divided against themselves, a being at war with its own nature. The secret of Marika and Radahn is one of the deepest in the lands between, and it lies at the very heart of the shattering, the god divided against herself in the breaking of the world. Radahn himself had come to the Golden Order from elsewhere, a champion who had once stood against it before becoming its most devoted servant. He had wed Rennala of the Carrion house and fathered children, before being called to Marika's side to become the second Elden Lord. His was a strange and divided nature, the champion who became a lord, the husband who left one family for a god, the being who was, in truth, the other half of the queen he served. In Radahn, as in Marika, the Golden Age held its contradictions, the divided god and lord standing at the summit of an order that carried its own ruin within it. Beneath Marika and Radahn stood the demigods, the mighty children and stepchildren of the queen, the princes and princesses of the Golden Age. These were the offspring of Marika, raised to more than mortal power, the demigods who held high station in the Golden Order. Godwyn the Golden, Morgott, Mog, Rykard, Radahn, Ranni, Malenia, Miquella, and more. The demigods were the great powers of the realm beneath the queen, the mighty children of the Golden Age. In the age of the Erdtree, they stood as the princes of the realm, the demigod offspring of the god who ruled the lands between. And it was among these demigods that the ruin would begin. Each of the demigods was a mighty figure in the Golden Age, a prince or princess of the realm, a power in the Golden Order. Godwyn the Golden was the eldest and most beloved, the Golden Prince, the first of the Golden lineage, cherished across the realm. Radahn was the mightiest warrior, the great general who would one day hold back the very stars. Malenia and Miquella were the twin Empyreans, the blade and the unalloyed gold, beloved and cursed. Rykard, Ranni, and Radahn were the children of Radahn and Rennala, the demigods of the Carrion line. Morgott and Mog were the hidden omen twins, born in shame beneath the capital. Each demigod was a great power of the Golden Age, a prince of the realm beneath the queen. Together, these demigods were the strength and the glory of the Golden Order, the mighty children who stood beneath Marika in the Golden Age. They held high stations, commanded great armies, embodied the power of the order their mother ruled. In the Golden Age, they were united beneath the queen, the demigods of the realm serving the Golden Order, the princes and princesses of a realm at its height. But this unity would not last, for when the Elden Ring shattered, these same demigods, united in the Golden Age, would turn upon one another, the mighty children of Marika, becoming the warring lords of the Shattering. The strength of the Golden Age would become the fury of the war that broke it, the demigods who stood together beneath the queen, tearing the realm apart in the ruin to come. The seeds of doubt. Beneath the golden light of the age, doubts and discontents were growing, the seeds of the ruin that would one day break the world. The Golden Order ruled under the will of the Greater Will, the distant god whose messengers, the Two Fingers, guided the realm. But not all were content under this rule. Among the demigods and the powers of the realm, doubt in the Greater Will was growing, a discontent with the rule of the distant god and its fingers. Some chafed at the order, questioned the will that guided it, resented the fate the gods had laid upon them. Beneath the golden peace, the seeds of rebellion were taking root, the doubt in the Greater Will that would one day help to break the Golden Order. One among the demigods carried this discontent more sharply than most. Ranni, the daughter of Radahn and Rennala, an Empyrean, a candidate to succeed Marika as a god. Ranni had come to hate her fate as a pawn of the Greater Will, to resent the destiny the gods had laid upon her, to long for freedom from the will that guided the realm. She was bitter that the gods had hurt her mother, bitter at the fate she had been given, bitter at the rule of the Greater Will. In Ranni, the doubt of the age had grown into something sharper, a determination to break free from the gods, whatever it took. And this discontent reached even to the summit, to Marika herself. For the queen who ruled the Golden Age had her own doubts, her own quarrel with the greater will that had made her a god. In time, Marika would turn against the very power she served, would move against the greater will, would take an action that broke the golden order she had built. The seeds of the ruin were growing even in the god who ruled the age. The doubt in the greater will reaching to the very summit of the golden order. The golden age seemed eternal, but beneath its light, the discontent that would break it was already spreading. In the demigods, in Ranni, and in the queen herself. There is a deep irony in this, that the ruin of the golden order grew from within, from the very god who ruled it. Marika had grown the Erdtree, established the order, ruled the golden age as its god. And yet she came to quarrel with the greater will, the power that had raised her to godhood, the distant god she served as vessel. The seeds of the shattering were sown at the very summit of the order, in the discontent of the god who had built it, the queen who would one day break the very thing she had made. The golden age carried within it, from the beginning, the doubt that would bring it down. Why Marika turned against the greater will is one of the deepest mysteries of the lands between, and the law does not answer it plainly. Some say she grieved, that a great loss drove her to break the order. Some say she rebelled, that she came to resent the rule of the greater will and moved to throw it off. Some say her whole reign was a long preparation for a strike against the god she served. Whatever the truth, the discontent was real, growing beneath the golden light, in the demigods who chafed at their fate, in Ranni who longed for freedom, and in the queen who would one day shatter the Elden Ring itself. The golden age was not as secure as it seemed, and the ruin was closer than any knew. For all its light then, the golden age held its ending within it. The Erdtree shone, the golden order held sway. The demigods stood as the princes of the realm. But beneath the golden peace, the doubt was spreading, the discontent growing, the seeds of the shattering taking root. It would take only a spark to set it all alight, a single act of murder to turn the growing discontent into open ruin. And that spark was coming, in a plot hatched by the very demigod who most longed for freedom. A night of assassination that would break the golden age forever. What that night brought, the murder that lit the fuse of the shattering, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the Night of the Black Knives, the assassination that became the catalyst of the shattering. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the Night of the Black Knives, the murder of Godwyn the Golden, and the spark of the shattering. Tonight we come to the spark, the single night of murder that lit the fuse of the shattering. In the Golden Age, when the Erdtree stood whole and the Golden Order held sway, a demigod hatched a plot to free herself from the gods, a scheme that required the forbidden power of death and the murder of one of her own kin. On a bitter night, assassins bearing black knives forged from stolen death entered the royal capital and struck down Godwyn the Golden, the first demigod ever to die. Tonight we sit with the Night of the Black Knives, the assassination that became the catalyst of the shattering. Tonight we sit with the Night of the Black Knives, the murder of Godwyn the Golden, and the spark of the shattering. The schemer. The plot that lit the fuse of the shattering was hatched by a demigod who longed above all things to be free. Ranni. Ranni was an Empyrean, a daughter of Radahn and Malenia, a candidate to succeed Marika as a god. But she did not want the destiny the gods had laid upon her. Ranni had come to hate her fate as a pawn of the greater will, to resent the will that guided the realm, to long for freedom from the gods who ruled the lands between. Above all, she wished to escape the influence of the Two Fingers, the messengers of the greater will, to slip free of the destiny they had set upon her as an Empyrean. To win her freedom, Ranni conceived a terrible plan. She wished to shed her Empyrean body, to abandon the flesh the gods had given her, while preserving her spirit, her soul, herself. She would cast off the body that bound her to the will of the gods and continue on in spirit, free of the destiny they had set upon her. But this was no simple thing, for to shed her body while preserving her spirit required a power found nowhere in the Golden Order, a forbidden power that the Order had sealed away. The power Ranni needed was death itself. In the Golden Age, true death had been banished from the lands between, the rune of destined death removed from the Elden Ring and sealed away, kept by Malekith, the Black Blade, the shadow-bound beast who guarded it. To work her ritual, to shed her body and preserve her spirit, Ranni needed a fragment of this destined death, the forbidden power that alone could sever body from soul. And so her plot began with a theft, the stealing of a fragment of death from the beast who guarded it. It is worth understanding the depth of Ranni's discontent, for it drove her to this terrible plot. As an Empyrean, she was a candidate to succeed Marika, to become a god, to carry the vision of the greater will. To most, this would seem the highest honor. But to Ranni, it was a cage, a destiny laid upon her by gods she had come to hate, a fate that bound her to the will of the greater will and its fingers. She did not want to be a god on the terms of the greater will. She wanted to be free of it, to escape the destiny it had set upon her, to belong to herself rather than to the distant god. Her longing for freedom was so great that she was willing to murder, to loose death, to break the Golden Age, to win it. There is something both sympathetic and terrible in this. Ranni's desire for freedom, her refusal to be a pawn of the gods, her longing to belong to herself, is a longing one can understand, even admire. But the price she was willing to pay for it was monstrous. The murder of her own kin, the loosing of death into the world, the breaking of the Golden Age. In Ranni, the discontent of the age found its sharpest and most ruthless expression. A demigod who would do anything, murder anyone, loose any horror, to win her freedom from the gods. Her plot was the spark that lit the Shattering, born of a longing for freedom pursued through the most terrible of means. Wastinti, the stolen death. Ranni's scheme required the most forbidden power in all the lands between, and to obtain it, she stole from the Guardian of Death himself. The rune of destined death was kept by Malekith, the Black Blade, the shadow-bound beast who served Marika as the Guardian of Death. It was Malekith who held the sealed rune, who kept true death banished from the lands between, who guarded the forbidden power that the Golden Order had removed from the world. To obtain the power she needed, Ranni had to steal from Malekith, to take a fragment of destined death from the very beast who guarded it. And she succeeded. Ranni stole a fragment of the rune of death from Malekith, taking the forbidden power the Golden Order had sealed away. With the help of assassins, Numen women with close ties to Marika herself, she obtained the fragment of death and turned it to her purpose. The theft of death from Malekith was the first step of her plot, the stealing of the forbidden power that alone could work her ritual, the fragment of destined death taken from the beast who had guarded it through the Golden Age. With the stolen death in hand, Ranni had the weapon her plot required, The fragment of the rune of death was forged into black knives, god-slaying weapons imbued with the power of true death, blades that could slay even a demigod. Through a fearsome rite, the stolen death was made into these black knives, the assassin's weapons given the power to kill what could not otherwise be killed. The Knight of the Black Knives took its name from these weapons, the god-slaying blades forged from stolen death, the knives that would strike down a demigod and light the fuse of the Shattering. The theft of death from Malekith had consequences that reached beyond the murder it enabled. Death, which had been banished from the lands between, was loosed again into the world, its power stolen and turned to murder. The Golden Order had removed true death from the realm, sealed it away, banished it, so that the faithful might live under the golden light without its shadow. And Ranni's theft undid this, loosing a fragment of death back into the world, breaking the banishment the Golden Order had maintained. The stolen death was a wound in the order of the world, the forbidden power loosed again into the realm that had sealed it away. In the aftermath, Malekith took steps to ensure such a theft could never happen again. The Black Blade made the rune of destined death a part of his own body, fusing the forbidden power into himself so that it could not be stolen a second time. The Guardian of Death became one with the death he guarded, binding the rune into his own flesh, ensuring that no one could take it from him as Ranni had. But the damage was done. A fragment of death had already been loosed, forged into black knives, used to murder a demigod. The theft that began the Night of the Black Knives had already loosed the power that would corrupt the Golden Age, whatever Malekith did to guard against another. Jasur, the murder of Godwyn. With the black knives forged, the assassin struck, entering the royal capital by night to murder a demigod. The assassins who bore the black knives were the Black Knife Assassins, new men women with close ties to Marika, wielding the god-slaying blades forged from stolen death. One night, they entered Leyndell, the royal capital, the golden seat of the Golden Order, and fell upon their target, Godwyn the Golden, the eldest and most beloved of Marika's children, the first of the golden lineage. In the heart of the golden capital, the assassins struck, driving their black knives into the Golden Prince. The assassins were figures of tragedy in their own right, Numen women bound to the terrible deed. As they fled the capital after the murder, one among them, an assassin named Tish, was slain protecting her mother, Alecto, the leader of the assassins. Even among the killers, there was loyalty and sacrifice, the daughter dying to shield the mother, a small tragedy woven into the great one. The Black Knife Assassins carried out the murder that lit the Shattering, and paid their own price in the fleeing, the Numen women bound to Marika and to the terrible deed they had done. The murder left a strange mark upon the world, a sign of the ritual's dark nature. When Godwyn died, a mark was scored upon his flesh, the curse mark of death, the sign of the forbidden power that had slain his soul. And because Ranni's body died in the same rite, the curse mark broke, splitting into two halves rather than forming a whole. The mark of death was divided between Godwyn and Ranni, the two deaths bound into a single broken sign. The curse mark split between the soul that perished and the body that died. It was a mark of the strangeness of that night, the dual death that slew a soul and a body together, the forbidden power of death loosed in a rite that broke the very sign it wrought. But the murder of Godwyn was a strange and terrible thing, for the black knives did not slay him as an ordinary weapon would. The blades were imbued with the power of destined death, and when they struck Godwyn, it was his soul that perished, not his body. Godwyn's soul alone was destroyed, slain by the power of death, while his body remained. He became the first demigod ever to die, the first recorded death of a demigod in all history, and yet his was a death like no other, the death of the soul alone, leaving the body behind. This was the doom the ritual had wrought upon Godwyn, to die in soul but live in body, to become the first of those who live in death. His soulless body remained, and it was interred in the roots of the Erdtree beneath Lendil, where it found no rest, mutating and warping, twisting into something monstrous. From Godwyn's corrupted body would spread Deathroot, the curse of those who live in death, the corruption of death loosed into the roots of the Erdtree. The Golden Prince, cherished across the realm, was doomed to a fate of terrible disgrace, sentenced to live in death, his corrupted body spreading the curse of death through the very roots of the Golden Tree. The horror of Godwyn's fate is hard to overstate. He was the most beloved of Marika's children, the Golden Prince, the first of the Golden lineage, cherished across the whole realm. And he was doomed to a fate worse than death, his soul destroyed, his body left to rot and warp beneath the Erdtree, becoming a source of corruption that would spread the curse of death through the Golden Tree. To die a true death would have been a mercy. Instead, Godwyn was sentenced to live in death, his soul gone, his body corrupted, his fate a disgrace that grieved all who had loved him. The Golden Prince became a thing of horror, the first of those who live in death, his corrupted body a wound in the very roots of the Golden Order, and the corruption spread. From Godwyn's warped body, Deathroot crept through the roots of the Erdtree, spreading the curse of those who live in death across the lands between. The dead began to rise, to live in death as Godwyn did, the corruption of the stolen death loosed into the world. What Ranni's plot had begun with a single murder grew into a spreading curse. The power of death loosed into the roots of the Erdtree, corrupting the Golden Tree from within. The Night of the Black Knives had loosed something terrible into the world, a corruption of death that would spread and grow, the first ruin of the Golden Age creeping through the roots of the tree that had ordered it. The dual death. The ritual that slew Godwyn's soul was bound to a second death, for Ranni's plot required a death of her own. Ranni's scheme was to shed her Empyrean body while preserving her spirit, and this required the death of another. The ritual bound two deaths together, the death of Godwyn's soul and the death of Ranni's body. At the moment the Black Knives slew Godwyn's soul, Ranni slew her own body, casting off the flesh the gods had given her while preserving her spirit. The two deaths were bound together, Godwyn's soul and Ranni's body perishing in the same terrible rite. Through this dual death, Ranni achieved what she had sought, freedom from her Empyrean body, the shedding of the flesh that bound her to the will of the gods. She cast off her body and continued on in spirit, freed from the destiny the two fingers had set upon her, slipping loose of the influence of the greater will. The murder of Godwyn was, for Ranni, the price of her freedom, the death of her kin bound to the death of her own body, the terrible rite that set her free. There is a coldness in this that marks Ranni's whole story. She murdered her half-brother, doomed the beloved Golden Prince to a fate of terrible disgrace, all to win her own freedom from the gods. The plot that lit the fuse of the Shattering was, at its root, an act of terrible selfishness and terrible resolve. A demigod willing to murder her own kin and loose the power of death into the world to escape the destiny the gods had set upon her. Whatever sympathy her longing for freedom may command, the price she paid for it was the murder of Godwyn and the loosing of death, the first blow in the ruin of the lands between. The Night of the Black Knives left its mark on Ranni, as well as on Godwyn. Though she had shed her body and preserved her spirit, the ritual left her changed, her spirit housed now in a new form, her old body slain. She had won her freedom, escaped the influence of the Two Fingers, slipped loose of the destiny the gods had set upon her. But she had done it through murder and death, and the mark of that deed would follow her. Ranni's freedom was bought with the blood of her kin and the loosing of death, a freedom stained by the terrible means she had used to win it. And the consequences of that night reached far beyond Ranni and Godwyn. The Night of the Black Knives was the first blow, the spark, the catalyst. It was the first death of a demigod, the loosing of death into the world, the wound that would not heal. And it drove Marika, the queen and god of the lands between, to an act of even greater consequence, an act that would break the Golden Order and begin the war. For the murder of Godwyn was the spark, but the shattering of the Elden Ring was the blaze, and it was Marika's response to Godwyn's death that would begin the shattering in earnest. What Marika did, in her grief or her rebellion, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow, we sit with the shattering of the ring, the act that broke the Golden Order and began the war. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we sit with the shattering of the Elden Ring, Marika's terrible act, and the breaking of the Golden Order. The murder of Godwyn was the spark. What came next was the blaze. Driven by the death of her beloved son, or moved by a rebellion long in the making, Queen Marika did the unthinkable. She took up a hammer and shattered the Elden Ring itself, breaking the very structure that held the world in its shape. In that single act, the Golden Order was broken, the shards scattered among her children, and the war that would ruin the lands between was set in motion. Tonight we sit with the shattering of the ring, Marika's terrible act, and the breaking of the Golden Order. Tonight we sit with the shattering of the Elden Ring, Marika's terrible act, and the breaking of the Golden Order. The breaking. Driven past the brink by the death of Godwyn, Queen Marika took up a hammer and shattered the Elden Ring. The death of Godwyn broke something in Marika. The murder of her beloved son, doomed to live in death, his soul destroyed and his body corrupting the roots of the Erdtree, drove the queen past the edge of what she could bear, and in her grief, or her rage, or a rebellion long in the making, Marika did the unthinkable. She took up a hammer and struck the Elden Ring, shattering the great structure of runes that held the world in its shape, breaking the very foundation of the Golden Order she had built. The Elden Ring was the order of the world, the anchor of all lands, the structure of runes that held the lands between in their shape. To shatter it was to break the world's order, to loose the chaos the ring had held in check, to end the Golden Age in a single terrible act. And Marika did it, striking the ring with her hammer, breaking it into shards, scattering the pieces of the divine order she had once carried as its vessel. The god who had held the Elden Ring, who had grown the Erdtree and established the Golden Order, now broke the ring with her own hands, shattering the foundation of the world. The hammer she used partially broke in the striking. So great was the force required to shatter the divine ring. This was no small thing, no easy act. To break the Elden Ring was to break the order of the world, and even for a god, it took a blow of terrible force, a blow that cracked the very hammer that struck it. When the ring shattered, the Golden Order shattered with it, the great structure of the world broken into pieces. The Age of Gold ended in the moment the ring came apart. What had held the lands between in their shape was broken, and the world began to fall into ruin. Consider the enormity of what Marika did. She was the vessel of the Elden Ring, the god who carried the divine order, the queen who had grown the Erdtree and established the Golden Order. Everything she was, everything she ruled, rested on the Elden Ring she carried, and she broke it. She took the foundation of her own power, the source of her own godhood, the order she herself had built, and she shattered it with a hammer. This was not the act of an enemy of the Golden Order. It was the act of the god at its very summit, the vessel of the ring turning against the ring she carried. Marika broke her own order, shattered her own foundation, ended her own golden age. What could drive a god to such an act remains one of the deepest questions of the lands between. The death of Godwyn was surely part of it, the grief of a mother whose son was doomed to live in death. But some see more than grief in the shattering, a rebellion long in the making, a quarrel with the greater will that had guided Marika's whole reign. Perhaps she broke the ring in grief, perhaps in rage, perhaps in a rebellion she had planned for ages. Whatever moved her, the act was the same. The god at the summit of the Golden Order took up a hammer and shattered the foundation of the world, ending the Golden Age and beginning the ruin of the lands between. The vain repair. In the moment Marika broke the ring, her other half sought to mend it, and the god was divided against herself. Recall the secret at the heart of the Golden Order. Marika and Radahn were one being, two halves of a single existence, God and Elden Lord sharing one nature. And in the moment of the shattering, this divided nature came to the fore. For while Marika shattered the Elden Ring, Radahn, her other half, sought to repair it, to mend the broken ring, to restore the order she had broken. The single being was divided against itself, one half breaking the ring while the other half struggled to make it whole. Radahn hammered the shards of the Elden Ring back together, seeking to repair the broken order, to restore the Golden Order Marika had shattered. But his repair was in vain. However he labored, however he sought to mend the ring, the shards would not hold, the order would not be restored. The being that had broken the ring could not now make it whole. The god divided against herself, one half undoing the work of the other. Radagon's repair was a doomed labor, an attempt to mend what the same being had chosen to break, the divided god at war with her own act. There is a deep tragedy in this image. The god divided against herself in the breaking of the world. Marika broke the ring. Radahn sought to mend it, and the two were one being, one existence at war with itself. Whatever drove Marika to break the ring, some part of her, the part that was Radahn, sought to undo it, to restore the order she had shattered. But the break could not be mended, the ring could not be made whole, and the Golden Order remained broken. The divided god stood over the shards of the world she had both broken and failed to mend, one being at war with its own terrible choice. This image lies at the very heart of the shattering, and it holds a mystery the law never wholly resolves. Why would a single being break the ring with one hand and seek to mend it with the other? Some read it as the sign of a god torn by her own act, one part of her committing to the rebellion while another part recoiled from it. The divided being embodying a divided will. Some read Radagon's repair as devotion to the Golden Order, the half of the being that remained loyal to the greater will, struggling against the half that had rebelled. Whatever the truth, the image of Marika and Radahn divided against each other, one breaking and one mending, captures the tragedy of the shattering. A god at war with herself, a world broken by a being that could not wholly commit to breaking it, and Radagon's failure was total. However he laboured, however he hammered the shards together, the Elden Ring would not be made whole. The break Marika had made could not be undone, not even by her own other half, not even by the being who shared her nature. The Golden Order remained shattered, the ring broken, the world fallen into ruin. Radagon's vain repair stands as a monument to the finality of the shattering, the proof that what Marika had broken could not be mended, that the Golden Age was ended beyond all restoring. The divided God had broken the world, and not even the half of her that sought to mend it could put the pieces back together. The scattered shards. When the Elden Ring shattered, its pieces became the great runes, and Marika scattered them among her children. The shattering of the Elden Ring did not merely break the order of the world. It scattered the ring into pieces, and these pieces became the great runes. Each great rune was a shard of the shattered Elden Ring, a fragment of the divine order, a piece of the power that had held the world in its shape. And these shards were inherited by the demigods, the mighty children of Marika, each taking a great rune, a piece of the broken ring, a fragment of the shattered order. And this scattering was no accident. Marika had premeditated the shattering, and she left instruction for her children, a command woven into the breaking of the ring. She called upon the demigods to take up the shards, to make of themselves what they desired, to strive to become the new lord or god of a mended order. Her instruction rang out to her children. Take up the great runes, and make of yourselves that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god. The shattering was not only an act of destruction, it was a challenge laid upon the demigods, a command to take up the shards and strive for the throne of a mended world. But the instruction carried a warning. Those who took up the shards and failed, who strove for the throne and fell short, would be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices. The demigods were set a terrible task, to take up the great runes and strive to become the lord or god of a mended order, knowing that failure meant to be cast aside, forsaken, reduced to mere sacrifices. Marika's instruction set her children against one another, each striving for the throne, each knowing that only one could win it, and the rest would be forsaken. The scattered shards became the prize of a war, the great runes the object of a struggle that would set demigod against demigod and ruin the lands between. There is a terrible logic in what Marika did, whatever her reasons. She broke the ring, scattered the shards among her children, and set them to strive for the throne of a mended world. In doing so, she turned her own children into rivals, into warring lords, into the combatants of a war over the shattered order. The demigods who had stood united beneath her in the Golden Age were now set against one another, each holding a shard, each striving to become the lord or god of a restored order, each knowing that only one could succeed. The unity of the Golden Age was shattered along with the ring. The mighty children of Marika turned into the warring powers of the shattering. Whether Marika intended the ruin that followed, the lore leaves uncertain. Did she foresee that her instruction would set her children to slaughter one another? Did she intend the war, the ruin, the endless struggle over the shards? Or did she hope that one of them would rise, take up the shards, and mend the order she had broken? Whatever her intent, the result was war. The demigods took up the great runes and turned upon one another, each striving for the throne, and the lands between fell into the ruin of the shattering. The scattered shards, meant perhaps to be gathered, and the ring made whole, became instead the prize of a war that would tear the realm apart. the imprisoned god. For the crime of shattering the ring, Marika was punished, imprisoned within the very Erdtree she had grown. The shattering of the Elden Ring was a rebellion against the greater will, the distant god whose order Marika had broken. And for this crime, the queen was punished. The Elden Beast, the servant of the greater will that was bound to the Elden Ring, crucified Marika upon a great rune arc and imprisoned her within the Erdtree, sealing the god who had broken the order inside the very tree she had grown. The queen who had shattered the ring was bound and imprisoned, punished for her rebellion against the greater will. This was the fate of the god who broke the world, to be crucified and sealed within the Erdtree, imprisoned in the golden tree at the heart of the realm. Marika, who had grown the Erdtree, established the Golden Order, ruled the Golden Age as its god, was now a prisoner within her own creation, bound within the tree for the crime of shattering the ring. The god who had held the highest power in the lands between was reduced to a prisoner, sealed within the Erdtree, punished for the rebellion that broke the Golden Order. There is a grim symmetry in her fate, the god sealed inside the very tree she had grown, imprisoned at the heart of the order she had both built and broken. And with Marika imprisoned, the greater will withdrew its favor from the lands between. The distant god that had guided the realm, whose order Marika had broken, turned away, abandoning the lands between to the ruin the shattering had begun. Grace was withdrawn, the guidance of the greater will removed, the realm left to the war of the demigods and the corruption spreading through the roots of the Erdtree. The god was imprisoned, the greater will withdrawn, the golden order broken, and the lands between were left to fall into the ruin of the shattering. The withdrawal of the greater will was a catastrophe in its own right. For the whole of the Golden Age, the lands between had been guided by the greater will, ordered by its distant hand, blessed by the grace that flowed under its rule. And now that guidance was gone, the distant god turned away, the realm abandoned to its ruin. Without the greater will, without a god upon the throne, without the Elden Ring to order the world, the lands between were left rudderless, a realm without guidance, falling into the chaos the shattering had loosed. The abandonment of the greater will left the realm to fend for itself, to fall into the war of the demigods, to descend into the ruin that the broken order could no longer hold back. And so the stage was set for the war. The ring was shattered, the shards scattered among the demigods, the god imprisoned, the greater will withdrawn. Everything that had held the Golden Age together was broken or gone. What remained was a realm of warring demigods, each holding a shard of the shattered order, each striving for a throne, each set against the others by Marika's own instruction. The Golden Order that had ruled the lands between in peace was ended, and in its place came the shattering, the long and ruinous war of the demigods over the shards of the broken ring. What that war became, and the mighty champions who waged it, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow, we sit with the great runes and the beginning of the war. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we sit with the great runes and the war of the demigods, as the shattered realm falls into open ruin. The ring was shattered, its shards scattered among the demigods, and Marika's instruction rang in their ears. Take up the great runes, and make of yourselves a lord or a god. Tonight we sit with what those shards were, the great runes that carried the power of the broken order, and with the war that their scattering began. For when the demigods took up the great runes, they turned upon one another, each striving for the throne, and the lands between fell into the long and ruinous war that gives this whole story its name. Tonight we sit with the great runes and the beginning of the Shattering War. Tonight we sit with the great runes and the war of the demigods, as the shattered realm falls into open ruin. The shards of the ring. When the Elden Ring shattered, its pieces became the great runes, fragments of the divine order carrying immense power. Each great rune was a shard of the shattered Elden Ring, a fragment of the great structure of runes that had ordered the world. These were not mere pieces of broken metal. They were fragments of the divine order itself, each carrying a portion of the immense power that had held the lands between in their shape. To hold a great rune was to hold a piece of the shattered order, a fragment of the power of the Elden Ring, a shard of the very structure of the world, and each great rune carried its own nature, a portion of the order it had once been part of. The demigods who inherited the great runes gained immense power from them, the power of the shards flowing into the mighty children of Marika. To hold a great rune was to wield a fragment of divine power, to carry a piece of the order that had ruled the Golden Age. The great runes made their holders mighty beyond even the power they had held as demigods, each shard a source of divine strength drawn from the shattered ring. But the great runes were shards of a broken thing, and they carried the damage of the shattering. Some of the runes were cracked, weakened, their power diminished by the breaking. Some carried corruption, a taint drawn from the shattering or from the nature of the demigod who held them. The great runes were fragments of a broken order, and their power, immense as it was the power of shards, damaged and incomplete. To restore a great rune to its full strength required a rune arc, a means of mending the shard, of drawing forth its full power. The runes were mighty, but they were broken, pieces of a shattered whole. This damage reflected the nature of the shattering itself. The Elden Ring had been a whole, a complete structure of runes ordering the world, and in breaking it, Marika had scattered its pieces and damaged them too, cracking and weakening and tainting the shards. The great runes were not clean fragments of a perfect order. They were the broken pieces of a shattered thing, carrying the wounds of the breaking. Some were diminished, some corrupted, all of them incomplete, each a damaged shard of the order that had once been whole. The power they carried was real, immense, divine, but it was the power of broken things, wounded by the very act that had created them. And this mattered for the war to come. To claim the throne, to mend the Elden Ring, and become its new lord, a demigod would need to gather the shards and restore them, to make the broken pieces whole again. But the shards were damaged, corrupted, scattered among warring demigods who would not give them up. To gather the great runes was to wage war against those who held them. To restore them was to mend what the shattering had broken. The damaged shards were the prize and the problem of the war, the broken pieces of the order that the demigods fought to gather and could not easily make whole. The inheritance of power. The demigods each inherited a great rune, and with it a portion of the power of the shattered order. When the Elden Ring shattered, its shards passed to the demigods, the mighty children of Marika, each taking a great rune. Godric, Rykard, Radahn, Ranni, Morgott, Renala, Malenia and Miquella, Morg, the demigods and the great powers of the realm, each came to hold a shard of the shattered ring, a great rune carrying a portion of the divine order. The power of the Elden Ring, once held whole by Marika, was now divided among her children, each holding a fragment, each wielding a shard of the shattered order. This inheritance made the demigods the great powers of the shattered realm. Already mighty as the children of a god, They were made mightier still by the great runes, each shard adding the power of the divine order to the strength they already held. The demigods became the lords of the lands between, each holding a great rune, each wielding a fragment of the shattered order, each a power to be reckoned with in the war to come. The inheritance of the great runes made Marika's children into the warring lords of the Shattering, mighty beyond measure, each holding a piece of the broken world. And with the great runes came Marika's challenge. The demigods held the shards, and Marika's instruction rang in their ears. Take up the great runes, and make of yourselves a lord or a god. To become the new lord of a mended order, a demigod would need to gather the shards, to hold enough of the great runes to restore the Elden Ring and claim the throne. And so, the inheritance of power became the seed of war, each demigod holding a shard, each striving to gather more, each set against the others in the struggle to mend the ring and claim the throne of the lands between. There is a cruelty in how the inheritance was arranged, whether Marika intended it or not. By scattering the shards among all her children, she ensured that no single demigod held enough to claim the throne alone. To become the lord of a mended order, a demigod would have to take the shards from the others, to wage war against their own kin, to gather by force what had been divided among them. The inheritance of the great runes was an inheritance of war, each demigod given a piece of the throne and set against all the others who held the rest. The scattering that made the demigods mighty also made them rivals, each holding a shard the others would need, each a target and a threat to all the rest. And so the seeds of the whole war lay in this inheritance. The demigods held their shards, coveted the shards of others, and knew that only by gathering the great runes could any of them claim the throne. Marika's instruction had promised the throne to whoever could make of themselves a lord or a god, and the only path to that throne ran through the other demigods, through war, through the gathering of the scattered shards. The inheritance of power was the inheritance of conflict. The great runes, the prize that set the children of Marika against one another. The shards of the broken order becoming the cause of the war that would ruin the realm. The war begins. With the shards inherited and the challenge laid, the demigods turned upon one another, and the war of the Shattering began. Marika's instruction had set her children against one another, each striving for the throne, each knowing that only one could claim it. And so, when the demigods held their great runes, they went to war. They turned upon one another, the mighty children of Marika, becoming the warring lords of the Shattering, each striving to gather the shards, to defeat the others, to become the lord or god of a mended order. The unity of the Golden Age was shattered along with the ring, and in its place came war, the demigods set against one another in a struggle for the throne. This was the Shattering, the great war that gives this whole story its name. It was a war of demigods, each holding a shard of the divine order, each wielding power beyond the mortal, each striving to defeat the others and claim the throne. Across the lands between, the demigods fought, their armies clashing, their powers loosed upon the realm, the war spreading ruin across the lands that had known the golden peace. The Shattering was a war unlike any the realm had seen, a struggle of God's children for the throne of a broken world, waged with the power of the shattered ring. And the war was terrible. The demigods were mighty beyond measure, and their war loosed devastation upon the lands between. Whole regions ruined, armies destroyed, the realm torn apart in the struggle for the throne. The Golden Age had known peace under the Golden Order. The Shattering brought war, ruin, and devastation. The mighty children of Marika tearing the realm apart in their struggle for the shards. The war spread across the lands between, each demigod holding their domain, each striving against the others, the realm descending into the long and ruinous war of the Shattering. The scale of the devastation is hard to imagine. These were not mortal armies clashing over borders. These were the children of a god, each wielding a shard of the divine order, each commanding armies and powers beyond the mortal. When they warred, the very land suffered. Whole regions laid waste, populations destroyed, the realm scarred by battles between beings of divine power. The war of the Shattering was a catastrophe on a scale the lands between had never known, the mighty demigods loosing their power upon the realm, the struggle for the throne ruining the very lands it was fought over. And the war did not end quickly. The demigods were mighty, and evenly enough matched that none could win a swift victory. None could gather the shards and claim the throne outright. The war dragged on, battle after battle, the demigods striving against one another without any reaching the throne. It became a long and grinding conflict, a war of attrition among the children of a god, each too strong to be easily defeated, none strong enough to win. The Shattering became a long ruin rather than a swift struggle, a war that ground on across the lands between, wearing away the realm and the demigods alike, none able to end it by claiming the throne that Marika's instruction had set them to seek. Generations would pass in this war, the conflict dragging on so long that it wore the very demigods down, the mighty children of Marika diminished by the endless struggle they could not win. The domains of the demigods. As the war spread, the demigods held their domains across the lands between, each a lord of their own region in the shattered realm. The Shattering was fought across the whole of the lands between, and the demigods held their domains, each a lord of their own region, each a power in their own land. In Limgrave, Godric the Grafted held Stormvale Castle, a lesser demigod clinging to his shard. In the volcanic lands of Mount Gelmir, Rykard held Volcano Manor, turning to blasphemy and the god-devouring serpent. In Caelid, Radahn, the mightiest warrior of the demigods, held his domain, the great general of the Shattering. In Leonia, Renala and the Carian House held Raya Lucaria and the moonlit lands. And at the heart of the realm, in the royal capital of Leyndell, the Erdtree itself still stood, defended by those who remained loyal to it. Morgoth, the Omen King, held Leyndell and defended the Erdtree, guarding the capital and the Golden Tree against the demigods who would claim it. Though the ring was shattered and the god imprisoned, the Erdtree still stood at the heart of the realm, and Morgoth stood as its defender, holding the capital against all who came. The heart of the Golden Order, broken as it was, still had its guardian, the Omen King who defended the Erdtree through all the ruin of the Shattering. Far to the north and east, other demigods held their domains. Malenia and Miquella, the twin Empyreans, tied to the Haligtree they would raise as a refuge. Mog, the other Omen twin, who would come to hold the bloody domain beneath the earth. Across the lands between, the demigods held their regions, each a lord of their own domain, each a power in the shattered realm. The war of the Shattering was fought across all these domains, the demigods striving against one another from their strongholds, the realm divided among the warring children of Marika. These domains became the fronts of the war, the strongholds from which the demigods waged their struggle. From Stormvale and Volcano Manor, from Caelid and Leonia, from Leyndell and the distant Haligtree, the demigods held their lands and struck at one another. The war fought across the whole breadth of the lands between. Each domain was a power base, a stronghold, a piece of the realm held by a demigod striving for the throne. The map of the Shattering was a map of these domains, the realm divided among the warring children of Marika, each holding their land against the others, and each domain bore the mark of the demigod who held it. Caelid, where Radahn warred, would become a scarred and ruined land, blasted by the battles fought there. The volcanic lands of Gelmir bore the mark of Rykard's blasphemy. Leyndell remained the golden heart of the realm, defended by Morgoth against all comers. The domains were not merely territories, they were the expressions of the demigods who held them. Each land shaped by its lord, each region marked by the power and the nature of the demigod who ruled it. The lands between became a patchwork of demigod domains, each bearing the mark of its lord, the whole realm divided and scarred by the war of the Shattering. What became of the mighty demigods who held these domains, the champions who waged the war, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the champions of the war, the mighty demigods and the battles of the Shattering. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the champions of the war, Radahn and Malenia, and the great battles that defined the Shattering. The war of the Shattering was waged by mighty champions, the demigod children of Marika, each a power beyond the mortal, each striving for the throne. Tonight we sit with these champions and the battles that defined the war, the mightiest warrior of them all, and the blade who fought him to a standstill, the grafted lord clinging to his castle, the blasphemer who fed himself to a serpent, and the loyal king who defended the Erdtree through all the ruin. Tonight we sit with the champions of the war and the great battles of the Shattering. Tonight we sit with the champions of the war, Radahn and Malenia, and the great battles that defined the Shattering. The mightiest warrior. Among all the demigods of the Shattering, one stood as the mightiest warrior, Radahn, the general of Caelid. Radahn was the strongest of the demigods in raw martial might, a towering warrior of immense strength, the greatest general of the Shattering. He was a master of gravitational magic, a power he had learned to hold back the very stars, for the fate of his sister Ranni was tied to the stars, and Radahn held them in place with his magic to keep her destiny from moving. So mighty was Radahn that he could halt the stars themselves, the Star Scourge, the general whose power reached to the heavens. In the war of the Shattering, Radahn held Caelid, his domain in the east, and there he waged his part of the war, the mightiest warrior of the demigods, holding his ground against all comers. His strength was legendary, his martial might beyond that of any other demigod, his armies fierce and loyal. Radahn was the champion that none could easily defeat, the mightiest warrior of the Shattering, holding Caelid against the war that raged across the lands between. To face Radahn in battle was to face the strongest of all the demigods, the general whose power could halt the stars. And it was Radahn who fought the most legendary battle of the whole Shattering, a duel against another champion that would scar his domain forever. For into Caelid came Malenia, the blade of Miquella, one of the twin Empyreans, a warrior whose skill matched Radahn's strength. The clash between them would become the defining battle of the Shattering, a duel between the mightiest warrior and the greatest blade, a battle that would ruin Caelid and mark both champions forever. There is something worth pausing on in Radahn's power over the stars, for it reveals the tangled bonds among the demigods even in war. Radahn had learned his gravitational magic to hold back the stars, and he did this for his sister Ranni. When Ranni cast off her body on the night of the Black Knives, her fate became bound to the stars, and the movement of the stars threatened to move her destiny. So Radahn, mighty in his gravitational magic, held the stars in place, halting their movement to keep his sister's fate from turning. Even in the ruin of the Shattering, the bonds among Marika's children endured, the mightiest warrior using his power to protect the sister who had begun the whole catastrophe. This is part of what makes Radahn so compelling a figure. He was the strongest of the demigods, a warrior of terrible might, the Star Scourge who could halt the heavens. And yet his power served a bond of love, the holding of the stars for his sister's sake, an act of devotion woven into the ruin of the war. Radahn was mighty and loyal, a warrior of legend who used his terrible strength to protect his kin, until the Battle of Aeonia broke his mind and reduced him to a maddened beast. The mightiest warrior of the Shattering was also one of its most devoted. His power turned to the protection of his sister, even as the realm fell into ruin around him. The Battle of Aeonia. The greatest battle of the Shattering was the duel between Radahn and Malenia, a clash that scarred the lands between. Malenia, the blade of Miquella, was one of the most skilled warriors of all the demigods, a peerless blade despite the curse of the scarlet rot she had carried since birth. In the War of the Shattering, she led a campaign into Caelid, into Radahn's domain, and there she met the mightiest warrior of the demigods in battle. The two champions clashed, the greatest blade against the strongest warrior, in a duel that would become the most legendary battle of the whole Shattering. The battle was long and terrible, and neither champion could overcome the other. Malenia's skill matched Radahn's strength, the blade and the warrior fighting to a standstill, neither able to claim victory. And at the height of the battle, unable to defeat Radahn by the blade alone, Malenia unleashed the power she had held in check her whole life. She bloomed into the scarlet rot, loosing the corruption of her curse across the battlefield. The rot bloomed in a great flower of corruption, and Aeonia, spreading across Caelid, drowning the land and the armies in the scarlet rot. The blooming of the rot decided the battle, but it ruined the land. Radahn survived the scarlet rot, but he was stricken by it, the corruption seizing his mind, driving the mightiest warrior of the demigods into madness. And Caelid itself was ruined, the once living land transformed into a rotting wasteland, a scarred and corrupted domain drowned in the scarlet rot. Malenia too was grievously wounded, the blooming costing her dearly. The Battle of Aeonia ended without a true victor, both champions marked forever, and Caelid left a rotting ruin, the greatest battle of the Shattering leaving only devastation in its wake. The aftermath of the battle shows the true cost of the Shattering. Here were two of the mightiest demigods, the strongest warrior and the greatest blade, and their clash produced no victor, only ruin. Radahn, the mighty general, was reduced to a mindless creature, his great mind lost to the rot, the Star Scourge, who had held the stars, now a maddened beast prowling the ruins of his own domain. Malenia, the peerless blade, was grievously wounded and would withdraw to slumber, her body ravaged by the rot she had loosed. And Caelid, once a living land, became a rotting wasteland, a monument to the devastation of the Shattering, the ruin of a whole region born of a single battle between two demigods. There is a bitter lesson in the Battle of Aeonia, the defining clash of the whole war. It was fought between two of the mightiest champions of the Shattering, and it settled nothing. Neither claimed the throne, neither won a lasting victory, neither gained anything but ruin. Both were marked forever, one driven mad, one grievously wounded, and the land between them was destroyed. This was the Shattering in miniature. Mighty champions clashing, achieving nothing but devastation. The war grinding on without resolution, while the realm was ruined. The greatest battle of the war produced no victor, only a rotting wasteland and 2 broken champions, a testament to the futility and the ruin of the whole Shattering. The Lesser Lords. Not all the champions of the Shattering were mighty. Some were lesser lords, clinging to their shards, and one turned to blasphemy to win the power he lacked. Among the demigods was Godric, a lesser lord who held Stormvale Castle in Limgrave, one of the weakest of Marika's descendants. Godric had little of the raw power of the great demigods, and to compensate, he turned to grafting, stitching the limbs and parts of others onto his own body, seeking through this monstrous practice to gain the strength he lacked. Godric the Grafted was a lord clinging to his castle and his shard, a lesser demigod grafting the parts of others onto himself in a desperate bid for power, holding Stormvale against the war that raged around him. Another of the demigods took a darker path still, Rykard, who held Volcano Manor in the volcanic lands of Mount Gelmir. Rykard turned to blasphemy, seeking to overthrow the gods themselves, and to gain the power for his rebellion, he fed himself to a great serpent, becoming the god-devouring serpent. Rykard abandoned his human form for the immortal appetite of the serpent, a blasphemer who sought to devour the very gods, holding Volcano Manor as he pursued his monstrous rebellion. His was a path of blasphemy and transformation, a demigod who became a monster in his war against the gods. These lesser lords and blasphemers show the range of the Shattering's champions. Some, like Radahn and Malenia, were mighty warriors of legendary power. Others, like Godric, were lesser lords clinging to their shards, compensating for their weakness through monstrous means. Others still, like Rykard, turned to blasphemy and transformation, abandoning their humanity in their war against the gods. The champions of the Shattering were a varied company, the mighty and the weak, the noble and the blasphemous, all of them children of Marika, all of them warring for the shards of the broken order. Godric's story is one of the most pitiable of the Shattering. He was a lesser demigod, distant from the great power of his mightier kin, and as the war ground on, his position grew ever weaker. To cling to what he had, he grafted the limbs and parts of others onto his own body, stitching soldiers and beasts and even dragons onto himself in a grotesque bid for strength. Godric the Grafted became a patchwork of stolen parts, a lord clinging to his shard through monstrous means, holding Stormvale Castle as the war passed him by. His was the desperation of the weak in a war of the mighty, a lesser lord grafting the parts of others onto himself to survive among demigods far stronger than he. Rykard's path was darker and grander in its ambition. Where Godric merely sought to survive, Rykard sought to overthrow the gods themselves, to end the tyranny of the Golden Order and the Greater Will. And to gain the power for this rebellion, he made a monstrous bargain, feeding himself to a great serpent and becoming the god-devouring serpent, an immortal creature of endless appetite. Rykard abandoned his humanity for the power to devour gods, holding Volcano Manor as he pursued his blasphemous rebellion. His was a tragedy of ambition, a demigod who became a monster in his war against the gods. His noble aim of ending divine tyranny corrupted into the endless hunger of the serpent he became. In Rykard, the Shattering shows how even a worthy cause could be poisoned by the means chosen to pursue it, the rebel against tyranny becoming a monster in his rebellion. The Loyal Defender. Against all the warring demigods stood one who fought for the Erdtree itself rather than for the throne. Morgoth, the loyal defender. At the heart of the lands between, in the royal capital of Lindel, the Erdtree still stood, and it had a defender, Morgoth, the Omen King. Morgoth was one of the Omen twins, born beneath the capital, cursed with the horns of the Omen, hidden away in shame. And yet, despite the cruelty the Golden Order had shown him, despite being cast aside for his Omen curse, Morgoth remained loyal to the Erdtree, taking up its defense against all the demigods who would claim it, while the other demigods warred for the throne, seeking to gather the shards and become the new lord of a mended order. Morgoth fought for a different cause. He defended the Erdtree, guarded Lindel, held the capital against all who came, remaining loyal to the Golden Order that had scorned him. Morgoth took the name of the last king of the Erdtree, styling himself its defender, standing against the ambitions of the other demigods, guarding the golden heart of the realm through all the ruin of the Shattering. There is a deep tragedy and a deep nobility in Morgoth's stand. He had been cursed, hidden, scorned by the very order he now defended, cast aside for the Omen horns he bore. And yet, he gave his loyalty to that order, defending the Erdtree against the demigods who warred for the throne, remaining faithful to the Golden Order that had shown him only cruelty. Morgoth was the loyal defender, the scorned Omen who guarded the Golden Tree, the champion who fought for the Erdtree rather than for himself. His stand was one of the noblest of the whole Shattering, the cursed king who remained faithful to the order that had cursed him. Morgoth's loyalty stands in sharp contrast to the ambition of the other demigods. Where they warred for the throne, sought to gather the shards, strove to become the lord or god of a mended order, Morgoth sought nothing for himself. He defended the Erdtree to guard it rather than to claim it, holding Lindel against all who came, faithful to an order that offered him nothing in return. He had been born in shame, hidden beneath the capital, denied his place among the demigods for the curse of his Omen horns. And still he gave his loyalty, defending the golden heart of the realm through all the long ruin of the Shattering, asking nothing, claiming nothing, faithful to the last. In Morgoth, the Shattering shows its capacity for nobility even amid ruin. The war was a catastrophe of ambition and betrayal. Demigods warring for a throne, tearing the realm apart in their greed for the shards. And against all of it stood Morgoth, the cursed king who wanted only to protect the Erdtree, faithful to an order that had scorned him, noble in a way none of the warring demigods could match. His stand did not save the lands between from ruin, for the Shattering ground on regardless, but it stands as a mark of loyalty and nobility amid the ruin. The scorned Omen who guarded the Golden Tree to the last, the loyal defender of a broken order. What became of the demigods who turned from the war to other paths, the schemers and the Withdrawn, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the schemers and the Withdrawn, the demigods who sought paths away from the war. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the schemers and the Withdrawn, Ranni and Miquella, and the demigods who sought paths away from the war. Not all the demigods threw themselves into the war for the throne. Some turned away from the open struggle to follow other paths, schemes and withdrawals that would shape the fate of the lands between as much as any battle. Tonight we sit with these demigods, the schemer who had begun it all, withdrawing to plot a new order among the stars, the gentle Empyrean who raised a refuge for the scorned and sought to become a god, and the blood cultist who stole him away. Tonight we sit with the schemers and the Withdrawn, the demigods who sought paths away from the war. Tonight we sit with the schemers and the withdrawn, Ranni and Miquella, and the demigods who sought paths away from the war. The withdrawn schemer. The demigod who had begun it all withdrew from the war she had sparked, retreating to plot a new order for the lands between. Ranni, who had lit the fuse of the Shattering with the murder of Godwyn, did not throw herself into the war for the throne. Having shed her body and preserved her spirit, she withdrew from the open struggle, retreating to plot a scheme of her own. While the other demigods warred for the shards, striving to mend the Elden Ring and claim the throne of the Golden Order, Ranni had a different aim: to escape the greater will altogether, to found an order free of the distant god she had come to hate. Ranni's scheme was the Age of the Stars, a new order for the lands between. She did not wish to restore the Golden Order under the greater will. She wished to found a wholly different order, one that would take the influence of the greater will far away from the lands between, distant as the stars. Under the Age of the Stars, the meddling of the greater will and its fingers would be removed, the realm freed from the close rule of the distant god, set instead under a cold and distant order of Ranni's own making. This was her aim, the reason she had begun the whole catastrophe: to win freedom from the greater will and found an age of her own. And so Ranni withdrew and waited, plotting her scheme, biding her time. She hid herself away, watching the war of the demigods from a distance, waiting for the means to bring about her Age of the Stars. She would need a champion, a Tarnished who could serve her purpose, to carry out the final steps of her scheme. And so, while the demigods warred and the realm fell into ruin, Ranni waited in the shadows, the withdrawn schemer who had begun the Shattering, biding her time for the age she meant to bring about. Her patience would outlast the war itself, her scheme reaching forward to the Age of the Tarnished still to come. There is a cold consistency in Ranni's whole arc, from the Night of the Black Knives to her long withdrawal. She had begun the Shattering to win her freedom from the greater will, murdering Godwyn and shedding her body to slip loose of the destiny the gods had set upon her. And having won that freedom, she did not flee into hiding. She plotted, with cold patience, to remake the whole order of the lands between, to found an age in which the greater will would have no hold. Her ambition reached past escaping the gods, toward building a world free of them, a cold and distant order under the stars, ruled by her own vision, rather than the will of the distant god. This makes Ranni one of the most far-seeing figures of the whole Shattering. While the other demigods warred for the throne of the Golden Order, seeking to mend the ring and rule under the greater will, Ranni looked beyond the war entirely, toward a wholly new order. She saw that the throne the others fought for was still a throne under the greater will, still bound to the distant god she hated. And so she withdrew from that struggle, plotting instead to found an age that would take the greater will away, a new order under the cold stars. Ranni was the schemer whose vision reached furthest, past the war, past the Golden Order, toward an age of her own making that would outlast the whole ruin of the Shattering. The gentle Empyrean. One demigod turned from the war to raise a refuge for the scorned, and to pursue a gentler dream. Miquella. Miquella was an Empyrean, one of the twin children of Marika and Radahn, a demigod of immense power and gentle heart. He was, by some measure, the most powerful of all the demigods, possessed of a gift for the unalloyed gold that could resist even the influence of the outer gods. And yet he bore a terrible curse. He was cursed with eternal childhood, his body unable to grow, trapped forever in the form of a child. This curse shaped his whole life and his whole dream, the gentle Empyrean seeking to overcome the fate that bound him. Rather than throw himself into the war for the throne, Miquella turned to gentler and grander aims. He sought to heal his twin sister Malenia of the scarlet rot that cursed her, labouring to find a cure for the corruption that ravaged her. He grew the Erdtree, a great tree raised far from the Erdtree, as a refuge for the scorned and the afflicted, a sanctuary for the omen, the rot-cursed, and all who had been cast aside by the Golden Order. Miquella's dream was one of compassion, a refuge for the outcast, a gentler order than the cruel world of the Shattering. But Miquella's greatest aim was to overcome his own curse and become a god, to found a new and kinder order. To do this, he sought to shed his cursed child's body and be reborn, entering into a great cocoon within the Erdtree, a chrysalis from which he meant to emerge remade, grown, a god who could found an age of compassion. Miquella abandoned much to pursue this dream, even stripping away parts of himself in his labour. He entered his cocoon to be reborn, the gentle Empyrean seeking to become the god who would build a kinder world. But his rebirth would not go as he planned, for another demigod had designs upon him. There is something moving in Miquella's dream, set against the cruelty of the Shattering. All around him, demigods warred for the throne, tore the realm apart in their greed for the shards, pursued power through blasphemy and grafting and slaughter. And Miquella dreamed instead of compassion, of a refuge for the scorned, of a kinder order to replace the cruel world of the Golden Order. He sought to heal his sister, to shelter the outcast, to become a god who would build a gentler world. In the midst of the ruin, Miquella held to a dream of mercy, the gentlest of all the demigods, seeking to build something good amid the catastrophe. And yet, Miquella's dream carried its own shadows. To pursue his aims, he laboured with the power to compel love and devotion, a gift that could bind others to him whether they willed it or not. His refuge, his healing, his dream of a kinder order, all rested on a power that could charm and compel, a gentleness that carried within it the capacity to control. Even the gentlest of the demigods was not free of the tangled darkness of the Shattering, his dream of compassion shadowed by the power he wielded to pursue it. Miquella was the gentle Empyrean, but his gentleness was a complicated thing, a dream of mercy pursued through a power that could bind and compel. The blood cultist. While Miquella lay in his cocoon, another demigod stole him away, a blood cultist with designs of his own, Morg. Morg was one of the Omen twins, the brother of Morgoth, born beneath the capital and cursed with the horns of the Omen. But where Morgoth remained loyal to the Erdtree, Morg turned to a darker path, becoming a cultist of the Formless Mother, an outer god of blood. Morg embraced his Omen blood, made a cult of it, drew his power from the blood rituals of the Formless Mother, becoming the Lord of Blood in his domain beneath the earth. He was a demigod who had turned wholly to the worship of a blood god, pursuing a dark and bloody dream, and Morg's dream centered on Miquella. Morg sought to found a new dynasty, and he wished to raise Miquella up as his consort, the godchild at the center of a bloody new order. To this end, Morg stole Miquella's cocoon, spiriting away the sleeping Empyrean to his domain, Mogwyn Palace, deep beneath the earth. There he tended the cocoon with his blood, seeking to nurture Miquella toward the rebirth that would make him a god, so that Morg might raise him as the consort of his new dynasty. The gentle Empyrean, seeking to be reborn as a god of compassion, was stolen away by the blood cultist to serve a bloody dream. There is a dark irony in this, the gentle dreamer stolen by the blood cultist. Miquella had sought to build a refuge for the scorned, to become a god of compassion, to found a kinder order. And in his vulnerable cocoon, he was seized by Mog, drawn into a bloody scheme he had never sought, made the centerpiece of a dynasty of blood. The kidnapping of Miquella shows how even the gentlest dream could be turned to dark ends in the ruin of the Shattering. The compassionate Empyrean stolen away to serve the bloody ambition of the Lord of Blood. Both demigods had turned from the war for the throne, but their paths crossed in the theft of the cocoon. The gentle dreamer and the blood cultist bound together in a dark scheme beneath the earth. Mog and Morgoth, the two Omen twins, make a striking contrast, the two sons of shame who took opposite paths. Both were born beneath the capital, cursed with the horns of the Omen, hidden away and scorned by the Golden Order. And from that shared beginning of shame, they went in opposite directions. Morgoth turned to loyalty, defending the Erdtree that had scorned him, faithful to the order that had cast him aside. Mog turned to blood and rebellion, embracing his Omen curse, making a cult of his cursed blood, serving the formless mother, and pursuing a bloody dynasty of his own. The two Omen twins, from the same shame, became the loyal defender and the blood cultist, opposite answers to the same cruel fate. In Morg's theft of Miquella, the dark currents of the Shattering come together. Here was a demigod, scorned and cursed, who had turned to the worship of a blood god and the pursuit of a bloody dynasty. And he reached out to seize the gentlest of the demigods, the dreamer of compassion, to make him the centerpiece of his dark ambition. The Lord of Blood stole the gentle Empyrean, binding the dreamer of a kinder world to a scheme of blood and dynasty. It is one of the darkest threads of the whole Shattering, the compassionate dreamer stolen by the blood cultist, the gentle and the bloody bound together in the ruin of the realm. The paths away from war. These demigods show that the Shattering was fought in schemes and withdrawals as much as on the battlefield that shaped the fate of the realm. The war of the Shattering was more than the clash of armies, more than the battles of Radahn and Malenia and the warring lords. It was also a struggle of schemes and dreams, of demigods who turned from the open war to pursue other paths. Ranni withdrew to plot her Age of the Stars, a new order free of the greater will. Miquella raised his refuge and sought to become a god of compassion. Mog pursued his bloody dynasty and stole the gentle Empyrean away. These were the schemers and the withdrawn, the demigods who shaped the fate of the realm through means other than open war. And their schemes would outlast the war itself. The battles of the Shattering would grind to their ruinous stalemate, the warring demigods diminished and broken, none claiming the throne. But the schemes of Ranni, the dream of Miquella, the ambition of Mog, these reached forward beyond the war, toward the age of the Tarnished still to come. Ranni waited for her champion. Miquella slept in his stolen cocoon. Mog tended his bloody scheme. The paths away from war outlasted the stalemate of the battlefield, continuing on, shaping the fate of the lands between long after the open war had ground to its ruin. In this, the schemers and the withdrawn are as much a part of the Shattering as the warring champions. The war ruined the realm, but it settled nothing. None of the warring demigods claiming the throne. It would be the schemers, the ones who had turned from the open war, whose designs would shape what came after, whose plots reached forward to the age of the Tarnished. The Shattering was a war of battles, and a war of schemes, and it was the schemes, in the end, that would decide the fate of the lands between. There is a lesson in this worth marking, that the loudest struggles are not always the ones that matter most. The battles of the Shattering, the clashes of Radahn and Malenia, and the warring lords were the great spectacles of the war, the mighty champions loosing their power upon the realm. And yet they settled nothing, produced no victor, left only ruin. It was the quiet schemes, the patient withdrawals, the designs of Ranni and Miquella and Mog that reached forward to shape what came after. The war was decided less by the clash of armies than by the plots laid in the shadows while the armies clashed. And so, as the open war ground toward its ruinous end, the schemes of the withdrawn demigods waited to unfold. Ranni's Age of the Stars, Miquella's dream of a kinder order, Mog's bloody dynasty, all of them reached forward past the war, toward the age of the Tarnished still to come. The battlefield would fall silent, the warring demigods diminished and broken, the throne unclaimed. But the schemes would continue, waiting for their moment, reaching toward the fate of the lands between. The war of the Shattering was ending in stalemate, but the schemes it had set in motion were only beginning to unfold. What became of the war itself, the ruinous stalemate that left the realm broken and the throne unclaimed, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the ruin of the lands between, the exhaustion of the war and the abandonment of the realm. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the ruin of the lands between, as the war grinds to its stalemate and the realm is left forsaken. The war of the Shattering did not end in victory. It ended in exhaustion, in ruin, in a stalemate that left the realm broken and the throne unclaimed. The demigods warred until they were spent, killed or maddened or withdrawn, and not one of them gathered the shards to mend the ring and become the new lord of the lands between. And so the greater will, disappointed in Marika's children, turned away from them, and the realm was left forsaken, a broken land without a lord, without grace, without hope. Tonight we sit with the ruin of the lands between, the exhaustion of the war and the abandonment of the realm. Tonight we sit with the ruin of the lands between, as the war grinds to its stalemate and the realm is left forsaken. The war burns out. The war of the Shattering did not end in the triumph of any demigod. It ground on until the champions were spent, and then it stopped, without a victor. The demigods had warred for the throne, each striving to gather the shards and mend the Elden Ring, each seeking to become the new lord or god of a restored order. But none of them succeeded. The war ground on, battle after battle, until the mighty champions were spent, their strength exhausted, their armies destroyed. Radahn was reduced to madness by the scarlet rot, prowling the ruins of Caelid. Malenia withdrew to slumber, ravaged by the rot she had loosed. Rykard became a monstrous serpent in his manner. Godric clung to his crumbling castle. One by one, the champions of the Shattering were broken, killed, or withdrawn, and none of them claimed the throne. The war had reached a stalemate, a ruinous stalemate in which no demigod could win. They were too evenly matched, too many, too stubborn, and none could gather enough of the great runes to mend the ring and claim the throne. The struggle that Marika's instruction had set in motion ground to a halt in exhaustion rather than victory. The demigods spent, the realm ruined, the throne still empty. The war of the Shattering burned itself out, leaving the lands between broken and lordless, the mighty children of Marika diminished and scattered, none having achieved the throne they had warred for. The reason for this stalemate lay in the nature of the war itself. Marika had scattered the shards among all her children, ensuring that no one of them held enough to claim the throne alone. To win, a demigod would have to gather the great runes from the others, to defeat and despoil their own kin. But the demigods were mighty, each a power beyond the mortal, each defending their shard and their domain. None could gather enough of the shards to prevail, for to do so meant overcoming all the others, and none was strong enough for that. The very design of the inheritance, scattered among many mighty rivals, ensured that the war would grind to a stalemate, no demigod able to gather the shards and claim the throne. And so, the war wore on until it wore out. Battle after battle, campaign after campaign, the demigods fought and were diminished, their strength spent, their armies destroyed, their domains ruined. And still none claimed the throne. The war ground on until the champions were too broken to continue, until the realm was too devastated to sustain the fighting, until the whole struggle collapsed into exhaustion. The Shattering ended because the war had consumed everything. With no victor emerging, the demigods spent, the realm ruined, the struggle burned out into a ruinous stalemate that left the throne unclaimed and the lands between broken. And so, the war ended in exhaustion and ruin, with no victor. The Elden Ring remained shattered, the shards scattered among the broken demigods, the throne unclaimed. The realm that had known the Golden Peace was left a ruin, its champions spent, its lands devastated, its order broken beyond mending. The war of the Shattering had achieved nothing but ruin, the mighty struggle of the demigods burning out into a stalemate that left the lands between broken and forsaken. The Forsaken Children. Marika's instruction had carried a warning. Those who failed would be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices. And in the ruin of the war, that warning came true. Recall the terms of Marika's challenge. She had bid her children take up the shards and make of themselves a lord or a god, but she had warned that those who failed would be forsaken, reduced to mere sacrifices. And in the ruin of the Shattering, this warning was fulfilled, for none of the demigods succeeded. None became the lord or god of a mended order. None claimed the throne. And so, by the terms of Marika's own instruction, they were all forsaken, all reduced to sacrifices, the mighty children of Marika failing the challenge she had set them. The greater will, disappointed in the demigods, turned away from them. The distant god had watched Marika's children war for the throne, hoping perhaps that one would rise, gather the shards, and mend the Elden Ring, to become the new Elden Lord, but none did, and so the greater will abandoned the demigods, ceasing to seek its Elden Lord among Marika's children, turning away from the broken powers of the Shattering. The demigods, who had warred to become the chosen of the greater will, were cast aside, forsaken by the distant god, as they had been warned they would be. There is a grim justice, or perhaps a grim cruelty, in this fulfillment of Marika's warning. Her children had taken up the shards, warred for the throne, torn the realm apart in their struggle. And in the end, none of them won, and all of them were forsaken, reduced to the sacrifices Marika had warned they would become. The demigods who had been the mighty princes of the Golden Age ended as the forsaken failures of the Shattering, cast aside by the greater will, their war achieving nothing but their own ruin. Marika's warning had come true, and her children were forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices in the ruin of the war. Consider what this meant for the demigods themselves. They had been the mighty children of a god, the princes and princesses of the Golden Age, raised to power beyond the mortal. They had taken up the shards of the shattered order, warred for the throne, wielded the power of the great runes, and it had all come to nothing. Radahn was a maddened beast, Malenia a sleeping ruin, Rykard a monstrous serpent, Godric a patchwork lord clinging to a crumbling castle. The mighty had been brought low, the princes reduced to the forsaken, the children of a god cast aside as failed sacrifices in a war that no one won. Their greatness had led only to ruin, their power only to their own forsaking, and the withdrawal of the greater will sealed their fate. The distant god had raised Marika to godhood, guided the Golden Age, watched the shattering with the hope perhaps that a new Elden Lord would rise from the war. But when none did, the greater will turned away, abandoning the demigods, ceasing to seek its lord among them. The realm was left without the guidance of the distant god, the demigods left without the favor they had warred to win. The greater will had given up on Marika's children, and in doing so, it had left the lands between without a lord, without guidance, without hope, a forsaken realm abandoned by the god that had once ordered it. The broken realm. Beyond the fate of the demigods, the lands between itself lay in ruin, a realm devastated by the war and forsaken by the gods. The war of the Shattering had devastated the lands between. Whole regions lay in ruin, scarred by the battles of the demigods. Caelid, once a living land, had become a rotting wasteland, drowned in the scarlet rot of the Battle of Aeonia. The battlefields of the war lay strewn with the dead, the armies of the demigods destroyed, the lands they had fought over broken and devastated. The realm that had known the golden peace under the Erdtree was now a ruin, its regions scarred, its people slaughtered, its lands laid waste by the war of the demigods. And the corruption of death spread through the ruin, from Godwyn's corrupted body beneath the Erdtree. The curse of those who live in death had spread, the dead rising to live in death across the lands between. Deathroot crept through the roots of the Erdtree, spreading the corruption of the stolen death, the dead unable to find true rest. The realm lay devastated by war, and corrupted by death as well, the curse loosed on the night of the Black Knives spreading through the broken land, the dead living on in a realm that had lost its order. And over it all, grace was withdrawn. The greater will had turned away, the golden guidance removed, the realm left without the blessing that had flowed from the Erdtree in the Golden Age. The lands between were forsaken, a broken realm without a lord, without grace, without the order that had held them whole. The Erdtree still stood, but it was sealed, its way barred, its grace withdrawn from the broken realm. The lands between lay in ruin, devastated by war, corrupted by death, forsaken by the gods, a broken land awaiting some new answer to the ruin of the Shattering. The sealing of the Erdtree was a wound at the very heart of the realm. In the Golden Age, the Erdtree had been the center of the world, the source of grace, the destination of the dead, the anchor of the Golden Order. And now it was barred, sealed by great thorns, its way closed, its grace withdrawn. The heart of the realm was shut against the people it had once blessed. The golden tree that had ordered the lands between now closed and unreachable, a sealed monument to the order that had broken. The realm that had lived under the Erdtree's light was now shut out from it, the golden tree barred against the broken world it had once ordered. Across the lands between, the marks of the ruin were everywhere. The regions lay scarred by the battles of the demigods, whole lands devastated, populations slaughtered, The dead rose to live in death, the corruption of the stolen death spreading through the realm. Grace was gone, the guidance of the gods withdrawn, the Erdtree sealed. The people of the lands between lived on in a broken realm, without the order that had blessed them, without the grace that had guided them, without the golden peace that had once held the realm whole. The Shattering had left the lands between a ruin, a broken land forsaken by its gods, awaiting some answer that had not yet come. The stagnant order. In the ruin of the Shattering, the lands between fell into a kind of stagnation, a broken order that could neither heal nor die. With the Elden Ring shattered and the throne unclaimed, the lands between fell into a strange and stagnant state. The order of the world was broken, but no new order had risen to replace it. The demigods were spent, but none had claimed the throne. The greater will had withdrawn, but no new god had risen. The realm hung in a broken stasis, neither healed nor wholly destroyed, a ruined order that could not mend itself and could not pass away. The lands between were caught in the aftermath of the Shattering, a realm frozen in ruin, and the corruption of death deepened this stagnation. In the Golden Age, death had been ordered by the Elden Ring, the dead returning to the Erdtree, the cycle of life and death held in its proper course. But with the ring shattered and death loosed, this cycle was broken. The dead could not find their proper rest, rising instead to live in death, the natural order of death and return broken along with the ring. The realm was caught in a corrupted stasis, unable to heal, unable even to die properly, the cycle of death broken along with the order of the world. This was the ruin of the Shattering at its deepest, an order broken so thoroughly that the world itself could neither heal nor pass away. The lands between hung in stagnation, the Elden Ring shattered, the throne empty, the demigods forsaken, the dead unable to rest, grace withdrawn, the whole realm frozen in the aftermath of the catastrophe. Something would have to break this stagnation. Some new answer would have to come, or the lands between would hang forever in the ruin of the Shattering. There is a particular horror in a world that cannot die. Ruin and destruction are terrible, but they pass. The destroyed world falls, and something new can grow from its ashes. But the lands between after the Shattering were caught in something worse. A ruin that could not resolve. A broken order that could neither mend nor end. The Elden Ring was shattered, but not destroyed. The demigods were spent, but not all dead. The dead could not rest, but rose to live in death. Grace was withdrawn, but the Erdtree still stood, sealed and barred. Everything hung in a broken stasis, unable to move forward, unable to heal, unable to die. The realm was frozen in the moment of its ruin, caught forever in the aftermath of the Shattering. And this stagnation could not break itself. The demigods were too spent to claim the throne, too broken to mend the ring. The greater will had withdrawn, seeking no more its lord among Marika's children. No power within the realm could break the stagnation, mend the ring, or restore the order that had shattered. The lands between hung in ruin, waiting for an answer that could not come from within, for a champion who was not among the forsaken demigods, for some new hand to take up the broken order and make it whole. And that answer, when it came, would come from an unexpected source, from those who had been cast out long before, from the exiles the greater will had once abandoned and now would call home. What that answer was, the calling of the Tarnished, is where our story ends. Tomorrow, in the final part, we sit with the call of the Tarnished and the meaning of the Shattering. Sleep well. Tomorrow, in the final part, we sit with the call of the Tarnished and what the Shattering leaves behind. The demigods had failed. The war had burned out. The realm lay in ruin. The throne stood empty, and the greater will had turned away from Marika's children. And so, in the ruin of the Shattering, the distant god turned to a new answer, an answer drawn from those who had been cast out long before, the Tarnished, the exiles who had lost grace and been driven from the lands between, now called home to succeed where the demigods had failed. Tonight, in this final part, we sit with the call of the Tarnished and with the meaning of the whole Shattering, the end of the old order and the beginning of the question of what would rise in its place. Tonight, in this final part, we sit with the call of the Tarnished and what the Shattering leaves behind. The Forsaken Exiles. The answer to the ruin of the Shattering came from those who had been forsaken long before. The Tarnished, exiles who had lost grace and been driven from the lands between. Long before the Shattering, there were those who lost the grace of the Erdtree, whose gold was taken from them, who were driven from the lands between in exile. These were the Tarnished, the Forsaken Exiles, cast out from the realm and its grace, wandering far from the golden light. They had been abandoned by the greater will, their grace withdrawn, their place in the golden order lost. For long ages they wandered in exile, the forsaken of the lands between, far from the realm that had cast them out. But the Tarnished were not wholly forsaken, for the loss of grace had given them a strange gift. Deprived of the guidance of the Erdtree, they had also slipped free of its hold on death. The Tarnished did not die as others did. When slain, they returned, rising again, the loss of grace freeing them from the death that bound the rest. In their exile, the Tarnished had become deathless, returning again and again, a resilience born of their very forsaking. What had seemed a curse, the loss of grace, had made them into something the ruined realm would need, and in the ruin of the Shattering, they were called home. With the demigods failed and the realm forsaken, the greater will, or the guidance of grace, called the Tarnished back to the lands between. The grace of gold returned to guide them, drawing the exiles home across the fog, back to the realm that had cast them out. The forsaken exiles were called to return, summoned back to the lands between to take up the task the demigods had failed, to seek the throne that none of Marika's children had claimed. The Tarnished were coming home. There is a strange justice in this, that the answer to the ruin came from the forsaken. The demigods had been the mighty children of a god, raised to power, given the shards of the shattered order, and they had failed, warring to a stalemate, forsaken by the greater will. And now the answer came instead from the Tarnished, the exiles who had been cast out long before, the forsaken who had wandered far from grace. The mighty had failed, and so the distant god turned to the lowly, to the exiles it had once abandoned, calling them home to succeed where the demigods could not. The forsaken were called to mend what the mighty had broken. And there is a fitting irony in the deathlessness of the Tarnished, the gift born of their forsaking. Because they had lost grace, they had slipped free of death, returning again and again when slain. And this made them uniquely suited to the task of the ruined realm, for to gather the shards from the demigods, to overcome the mighty children of Marika, would take a resilience beyond the mortal. The Tarnished, deathless in their forsaking, could rise again and again in the attempt, could fail and return and try once more. The very curse of their exile had made them into the answer the ruined realm needed, the deathless exiles who could attempt what would kill any other, called home to take up the task. The demigods had failed. The task of the Tarnished. The Tarnished were called home for a purpose, to succeed where the demigods had failed, to mend the ring and become the Elden Lord. The task laid upon the Tarnished was the very task the demigods had failed to complete. They were to gather the great runes, the shards of the shattered Elden Ring, from the demigods who held them. They were to restore the Elden Ring, to mend the shattered order, to take up the shards and make them whole again. And they were to become the Elden Lord, to sit upon the throne that had stood empty since the Shattering, to rule the mended order as the demigods never had. The Tarnished were called to succeed where Marika's children had failed, to end the ruin of the Shattering by claiming the throne. To do this, a Tarnished would have to face the demigods, the mighty children of Marika who still held their shards. Broken and diminished as they were, the demigods still guarded their great runes, still held their domains, still stood as the powers of the ruined realm. To gather the shards, a Tarnished would have to defeat them, to take the great runes from the demigods who had warred over them, to succeed by force where the demigods had fought one another to a standstill. The task of the Tarnished was a task of battle, of gathering the shards from the mighty, of overcoming the demigods that even each other could not overcome. And the one who succeeded would become the Elden Lord, the new lord of the lands between, to gather the great runes, to stand before the Erdtree, to mend the Elden Ring and claim the throne. This was the destiny offered to the Tarnished. Where the demigods had failed, a Tarnished might succeed, might end the ruin of the Shattering, might restore the order that had been broken. The forsaken exile called home from the wilderness was offered the throne of the lands between, the chance to become the Elden Lord and end the long ruin of the Shattering. There is a fittingness in this that runs through the whole story. The demigods had been given every advantage, born to power, granted the shards, set at the summit of the realm. And they had failed. Now the task passed to the Tarnished, who had been given nothing, who had been cast out, who had wandered in exile far from grace. Where the mighty had failed with every advantage, the lowly would attempt with none. The forsaken exiles taking up the task the demigods could not complete. The throne that the mighty children of a god had warred over and failed to claim was offered now to the exiles they had once stood so far above. And the Tarnished would attempt it in the only way their nature allowed, through failure and return. To face the demigods, to gather the shards, to overcome the mighty children of Marika, would take many attempts, many deaths, many risings. The deathless Tarnished could give this, could fail and return and try again, could throw themselves against the demigods until, at last, they prevailed. The task was vast, the demigods mighty, the road long and hard. But the Tarnished, deathless in their forsaking, could walk it, rising again after every fall, pressing on through every death, until one among them gathered the shards and reached the throne. The task of the Tarnished was a task of endless persistence. The deathless exiles pressing on through failure toward the throne the demigods had failed to claim. The question of the new order. But the throne was not the only path, for the ruin of the Shattering had opened a question. What would the new order be? The Shattering had broken the Golden Order, the old order of the lands between, and in breaking it, it had opened a question that had not existed in the Golden Age. What order would rise in its place? To restore the Elden Ring as it had been was one path, a return to the Golden Order under the Greater Will. But it was not the only path. The schemers and the Withdrawn, Ranni and the others, had their own visions of what the new order might be, and the Tarnished who came home would face a choice among them. Ranni waited with her Age of the Stars, her vision of an order free of the Greater Will, the distant god removed far from the lands between. Others had their own designs, their own answers to the question the Shattering had opened. The Tarnished who gathered the shards and reached the throne would face a choice: to restore the Golden Order as it had been, or to found some new order in its place, to follow the Greater Will or to break from it, to mend the old world or to make a new one. The Shattering had opened the future of the lands between to question, and the Tarnished would answer it. This is the deepest meaning of the Shattering, beyond the war and the ruin. The old order had been broken, and in its breaking, the future had been opened. No longer was the fate of the lands between fixed under the Golden Order and the Greater Will. Now it was a question, an open question, to be answered by whoever gathered the shards and reached the throne. The Shattering had ended the certainty of the Golden Age and replaced it with a question, the fate of the realm no longer fixed, but open now, to be decided by the once forsaken exiles called home to a broken world. There is a paradox at the heart of this, that the catastrophe of the Shattering was also a liberation. The Golden Age had been a time of peace and order, but it had also been a time of fixed fate. The lands between held in the certainty of the Golden Order. Ruled by the distant Greater Will, its future closed. And the Shattering, for all its ruin, broke that certainty. It ended the golden peace, but it also ended the fixed fate, opening the future of the realm to question for the first time. The ruin of the Shattering was also the opening of possibility, the catastrophe that broke the old order also breaking the certainty that had bound the realm. And this is why the choice offered to the Tarnished matters so much. They were not called merely to restore what had been, to rebuild the Golden Order just as it was. They were called to a realm whose future was open, to a choice among many possible orders. To restore the Golden Order, to found Ranni's Age of the Stars, to pursue some other vision entirely. All of these were possible now, in the open future the Shattering had made. The Tarnished came home to a choice, rather than a fixed destiny, the fate of the lands between resting on which answer they would give to the question the Shattering had opened. The ruin of the old world had made the new world a matter of choice, and it was the once forsaken exiles who would choose. What the Shattering means. So we come to the end, and to the meaning of the Shattering, the war that broke the world and opened its future. It began in the Golden Age, with the Erdtree whole, and the Golden Order at its height. It began with a murder, the killing of Godwyn on the night of the Black Knives, a demigod's plot to win her freedom from the gods. It grew into a catastrophe when Marika, driven past the brink, shattered the Elden Ring, breaking the order of the world and scattering its shards among her children. And it became a war, the long and ruinous war of the demigods, each striving for a throne that none would claim, until the war burned out into a stalemate that left the realm in ruin. The Shattering was a catastrophe, a war that ruined the lands between, that spent the mighty demigods, that broke the Golden Order and forsook the realm. Whole regions were devastated. The dead rose to live in death. Grace was withdrawn. The Erdtree sealed. It was a ruin as complete as any the realm had known. The Golden Age ended, the Order broken, the realm left forsaken in the aftermath of the war. The Shattering was the great catastrophe of the lands between, the war that broke the world, And yet, in its ruin, the Shattering opened something the Golden Age never had. A question, a choice, a future that was not fixed. The old order had held the lands between in a golden certainty, ruled by the greater will, ordered by the Elden Ring, fixed and unchanging. And the Shattering broke that certainty, and in breaking it, opened the future to question. From the ruin came the possibility of something new, a new order, a new answer, decided by whoever would take up the shards, rather than by the distant god, and reach the throne. The Shattering ended the Golden Age, but it began the Age of the Tarnished, the age in which the fate of the lands between would be decided anew. There is something in this that reaches beyond the story of one broken world. The Shattering is a story about the end of an old order and the opening of a new one, about the way that ruin and possibility are bound together, about how the breaking of a fixed world can also be the making of an open one. The Golden Age was beautiful, but it was closed. Its fate was fixed, its future decided, its people held in a certainty they could not change. And the Shattering, terrible as it was, broke that certainty and made the future a matter of choice. There is a strange consolation in this, that even the greatest ruin can carry within it the seed of a new beginning, that the breaking of an old world can open the way to a new one. That is what waits at the end of the Shattering, an open future beyond the ruin, a broken world that might yet become something new. The demigods failed, the realm fell into ruin, the Golden Age ended, but from that ending came a beginning, the call of the Tarnished, the opening of the future, the chance for the lands between to become something other than what it had been. The Shattering is a story of ruin, and also a story of possibility, the great catastrophe that broke the old world and opened the way to whatever the lands between would choose to become. This has been the entire timeline of the Shattering, the war that broke the world of Elden Ring, from the Golden Age before the fall, through the Night of the Black Knives and the murder of Godwyn, through Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring and the divided gods' vain repair, through the scattering of the great runes and the war of the demigods, through the champions and their ruinous battles, the schemers and their withdrawn dreams, through the burning out of the war and the ruin of the lands between, and at the last, to the call of the Tarnished, the forsaken exiles summoned home to a broken world, offered the throne the demigods had failed to claim, called to answer the question the Shattering had opened. The war broke the world, and from its ruin, a Tarnished would rise to decide what the world would become, told slowly, for the quiet between waking and whatever waits in the dark. Good night, my dear friend.